The night at St. Mary's Medical Center was supposed to be quiet. Dim fluorescent lights hummed softly above the empty corridors. The hum of ventilators and the occasional squeak of nurses' sneakers were the only sounds. It was the kind of night that made doctors feel they could finally catch a breath between emergencies. Dr. Ellen Carter, the attending physician for the night, leaned back against the counter in the ER, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through patient charts on her tablet. Most of the cases were minor: sprained ankles, flu complications, and the occasional drunk driver brought in by paramedics. Routine, predictable, safe. But all of that changed the moment the double doors to the elevators slid open. 14 black and tan police dogs stormed out, moving with a precision that made even the most disciplined officers in the ER stop in their tracks. Their handlers followed closely behind, uniforms crisp, eyes narrowed, hands firm on leashes, but somehow the dogs were leading. Nurses instinctively stepped back. Doctors exchanged incredulous glances. The K-9 units, each trained for detection, protection, and tactical response, were acting as one, like a single organism, a silent but powerful wave sweeping through the emergency room. And at the center of it all lay her. A teenage girl, unconscious, pale as porcelain, strapped to a gurney, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her hair, dark and tangled, spilled across the hospital sheet like ink bleeding on white paper. Bruises flecked her arms, faint and haunting, her clothes torn in small places that suggested a struggle. One paramedic hovered nervously at the side, muttering under his breath. How did they even know where she was? The dogs didn't bark. They didn't growl. They simply moved in a deliberate, choreographed formation, each one stopping in a calculated spot around the gurney. Then simultaneously they sat, 14 massive bodies encircling her like a fortress. Their ears pricked, noses twitching, eyes sharp and alert. One dog, a German shepherd with a scar above his left eye, let out a low, menacing whine that vibrated through the tile floor. It wasn't a warning to the humans. It was a warning to something else. Something invisible. Dr. Carter's heart pounded. She had spent 20 years in emergency medicine, seen gunshot victims, car crash fatalities, and everything in between, but she had never seen anything like this. "Move them," she whispered shakily to the nearest officer. "Please, they can't stay here." The officer swallowed hard, eyes darting between his K-9 and the girl on the gurney. "Ma'am, we can't. Not until we know she's safe. They won't let anyone near her." The phrase sent a chill down her spine. The dogs, trained to obey commands, were ignoring theirs. It wasn't stubbornness. It was instinct. Survival instinct. Protective instinct. Something primal that no human could override. Paramedics began to wheel her toward the ER beds, but the circle tightened automatically, dogs shifting positions, tails stiff, bodies blocking the way as if to say, "Not yet. She isn't ready. Nobody touches her." Dr. Carter noticed that her vitals monitor was flickering, heart rate irregular, oxygen saturation dipping dangerously low. She moved closer, trying to assess the situation, her stethoscope clutched in trembling hands. "Get me a crash cart," she ordered. Her voice was calm, but inside, panic gnawed at her ribs. A nurse hurried down the hall, returning moments later with the equipment. Dr. Carter activated the defibrillator pads, ready to respond if her heart faltered, but the girl's body twitched slightly on its own, weak, almost imperceptible. One dog leaned forward, nose barely touching her arm, sniffing the air around her IV line. Its hackles rose. Another dog mirrored the action, sniffing the back of her neck. Their behavior was synchronized, almost telepathic, and utterly terrifying in its intensity. Why are they acting like this?" one young nurse whispered, eyes wide. She hadn't seen a dog show this much focus outside of a field exercise, and even then never 14 at once, all reacting to a single person. Dr. Carter had no answer. Instead, she scanned the ER, trying to anticipate any threats she couldn't see. "Stay back," she instructed. "Everyone stay calm. Just let them do their job." Seconds stretched into minutes, each heartbeat echoing in the silent tension. The girl's chest rose and fell irregularly, her fingers twitching like the final sparks of a dying flame. And then, suddenly, one dog stepped closer to her head and froze, ears cocked. A soft whine escaped its throat, almost human in its desperation. Dr. Carter felt a lump in her throat. Something was wrong, dangerously wrong, and these dogs knew it before anyone else could. "What are they smelling?" the paramedic muttered, voice shaking. "Is it blood, drugs? I've never seen a K9 do that." The officers exchanged nervous glances. "It's not normal, not at all," one admitted. "They react this way only when there's a serious threat, a chemical, a toxin, or a person trying to harm her." Dr. Carter swallowed hard. Her mind raced. A hospital was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place for healing, not danger. And yet, here it was, danger had walked in, and the first to notice it were not the monitors, the alarms, or even the humans. It was the dogs. 14 pairs of instincts honed for life-and-death decisions, all pointing at the same invisible threat. As she prepared to examine the girl further, the air shifted. One dog stiffened at the foot of the bed, growling low, warning the humans to hold their position. Another pawed gently at her sheet, eyes pleading, almost commanding attention. Dr. Carter felt her chest tighten. This girl isn't going to make it on routine care alone. Something else is happening here. Then, before anyone could move, the girl's hand twitched, small, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a wave of hope through the room. The dogs immediately relaxed their posture slightly, yet remained vigilant. It was as if the smallest sign of life had validated their actions, but they knew the threat wasn't over. Outside, the night continued as usual. Streetlights cast long, pale shadows into the ER windows. Ambulances' sirens faded in the distance. And yet, inside, 14 police dogs formed a protective wall around a girl whose life was hanging by a thread, aware of dangers no human could see, ready to fight for her in silence. Dr. Carter realized with a chill crawling up her spine that this was no ordinary emergency. No accident, no coincidence. Whoever or whatever had put this girl in danger, it had underestimated the bond between humans and animals, instinct and survival. And the night, she knew, was far from over. Somewhere in the shadows, a presence lingered. The kind of presence that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, the kind that makes you question reality itself. The dog sensed it. The girl sensed it. And soon, Dr. Carter would discover just how deep this danger ran, and how terrifyingly close it already was. For now, all she could do was watch, and hope that the instincts of Fort the ER had transformed from a place of quiet routine into a theater of tense anticipation. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls as if echoing the unease in the room. The girl on the gurney, still unconscious, was the center of it all, encircled by the 14 police dogs. They sat like statues, yet every muscle in their bodies radiated alertness. It was not merely obedience, it was awareness, the kind of instinct no human could teach. Dr. Ellen Carter took a cautious step closer. Her eyes swept over the dogs, nodding their subtle cues. A tail twitch, a low whine, a paw gently pawing the sheet, but there was no randomness here. Each movement was deliberate, synchronized, and deeply purposeful. Her heart raced as she realized something chilling. These dogs weren't just reacting to the girl. They were reacting to something she couldn't see, couldn't hear, and couldn't feel. "Do you see that?" whispered a nurse behind her. They're acting as if there's someone else here, but there's no one else." Dr. Carter didn't answer immediately. She barely dared to breathe. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple. Her mind raced through every scenario: chemical spill, bomb threat, toxic exposure, active shooter. None of it made sense, yet her instincts screamed that danger was real and imminent. The first dog, a massive Belgian Malinois named Titan, moved forward and pressed its nose against the girl's arm, sniffing intently. His growl was low, almost imperceptible, but it resonated in the room like a warning. Another dog mirrored him, sniffing the IV line as if sensing contamination, while a third began circling her gurney slowly, ears angled sharply toward the corners of the room. Dr. Carter's pulse thudded like a drum. "Why aren't they barking?" she asked under her breath. A young officer leaned in, whispering, "That's what makes this terrifying. They bark for danger they know exists. Right now they don't bark, they watch, they judge, they calculate." Her eyes darted around the ER. Nurses clutched clipboards and held their breaths. Technicians paused mid-step, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. And all the while the girl lay there, fragile and vulnerable, oblivious to the silent army guarding her. Then the first tremor of terror struck the room. A soft metallic clink came from the hallway outside. The dogs froze instantly, ears up, heads snapping toward the sound. Their synchronized posture was uncanny. One Malinois growled softly, another barked once, sharp and commanding, cutting through the ambient hospital noise like a warning flare. Every human in the room jumped. Dr. Carter's stomach dropped. Something or someone was approaching, and the dogs had already detected it before any human eye could. The door to the supply closet creaked open slowly. A shadowy figure slipped through. Security officers tensed. Nurses gasped. The dogs' growls deepened, a low chorus that reverberated against the linoleum floors. Titan stepped forward, his stance protective, forming a barrier between the intruder and the girl. Dr. Carter realized then that these animals had not been trained for this. They were operating on instinct, heightened and honed beyond anything she had ever seen. "Stay calm," she instructed her team, though her own voice trembled. "Let them do their job." The shadow figure hesitated in the doorway. Seconds stretched into eternity. One of the handlers, hands trembling on the leash, whispered, "It's as if they know exactly who it is and they're waiting for a signal." Then came the moment that froze everyone in place. The girl's fingers twitched, slight and almost imperceptible. The dog's tension shifted immediately. Some sat down, some leaned closer protectively, but none of them relaxed entirely. It was as if the smallest sign of life had reassured them, yet also warned that the threat was far from over. Dr. Carter's stomach knotted. What had they sensed? She wondered. Paramedics wheeled the girl closer to a bed, prepping for a full examination. Dr. Carter attached a heart monitor, watching the rapid spikes and dips. Her pulse raced along with the beeping alarms. One of the nurses fumbled with a blood pressure cuff, glancing nervously at the circle of dogs. The Malinois at the head of the bed growled softly again, but his eyes were locked on the monitor, as if sensing not just the girl's pulse, but something beyond it. "Could it be a chemical?" one technician whispered. "Or a toxin," muttered another. "That's the only thing my K9 reacts this way to." Dr. Carter's eyes widened. A toxin here, in a hospital. The room went silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors and the dog's low hum of alertness. The idea seemed impossible. Hospitals were supposed to be safe, controlled, and yet the behaviors of 14 trained, independent K9 units suggested otherwise. Then came the first visible sign of danger. The IV bag hanging above the girl's gurney, standard hospital issue, or so everyone thought, shimmered under the harsh fluorescent light. Titan approached it, sniffing cautiously, and his growl turned into a warning bark, short and precise. Another dog leapt slightly, blocking the foot of the bed. A nurse gasped. That's not one of ours," she said, pointing at the IV bag. Dr. Carter froze, her mind raced. Someone tampered with her medication, she realized aloud. Someone brought a toxin into the hospital, and these dogs, she stopped herself. They smelled it before we even knew. The implications were terrifying. Someone had followed the girl into the hospital, prepared to finish what had already been started. And the dogs, 14 trained, instinct-driven guardians, had intercepted the threat with a precision no human could have matched. One of the handlers adjusted his grip on the leash, muttering, "They've never reacted this way in training or field work. Not altogether. This is unprecedented." The shadow in the hallway retreated slightly, perhaps aware that the dogs were watching, calculating, waiting for the right moment. Every human in the room held their breath, understanding, on some level, that the girl's life hung in a delicate balance. Suddenly, one of the dogs, a sleek, jet-black German shepherd, barked once, sharp and commanding. It was enough to make the shadow jump. The figure bolted, disappearing into the hospital corridors. Security cameras would later show a nurse's ID badge dangling from a stolen lanyard, but no one would ever see the intruder's face. Only the dogs had reacted correctly. Only the dogs had known what was coming before it happened. Dr. Carter knelt beside the gurney, placing her hand on the girl's pale arm. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. "You're safe for now," she whispered, though she knew it wasn't just her doing. 14 dogs, each breathing steadily, ears alert, formed an invisible shield. She realized in that moment that humans could plan, predict, and respond, but instincts were beyond calculation. And tonight, instincts had just saved a life. The monitors beeped steadily now, a fragile rhythm of hope, but the tension in the room was far from over. The dogs didn't relax completely. Their eyes followed every movement, every shadow, every shift in the air. They knew that the intruder might return and that the real danger wasn't past. It was waiting, just beyond the corridor in the silence. Dr. Carter stood and took a shaky breath. "We need a full sweep, every floor, every hallway. No one leaves until we know this girl is completely safe." The officers nodded, their faces tight with tension. But Dr. Carter's gaze drifted back to the circle of dogs. 14 creatures, trained and untrained alike, acting as one. Protecting a life that nobody else understood. Protecting a secret that had not yet been revealed. And somewhere deep inside, she felt it. An unspoken truth she couldn't ignore. The girl on that gurney was at the center of something far bigger than a simple accident, far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. And if the dogs were right, the night was only beginning. The night air in the hospital felt heavier now, charged with a tension that draped over every corner like a thick fog. Nurses whispered anxiously to one another, their footsteps cautious as they moved around the encircled gurney. 14 police dogs sat, tails stiff, ears up, eyes unwavering, forming an invisible barrier that no human dared breach. Even the hospital staff, hardened by years of trauma and emergencies, could feel the strange electricity in the room. Something was very, very wrong. Dr. Ellen Carter crouched beside the girl, finally getting a closer look. The girl's face was pale, almost ghostly, with smudges of dirt and faint bruises along her jawline and wrists. She was a mystery. No ID, no family, no phone, no personal items. Whoever brought her here, or whoever tried to silence her, had left her stripped of every connection to the outside world. The nurses had registered her under Jane Doe, a temporary placeholder, but to Dr. Carter, she felt nameless in the truest sense. A girl without identity, yet surrounded by 14 guardians who seemed to know her worth. The hospital's electronic records provided nothing. No missing person reports matched her description. No one had called ahead. It was as if she had appeared out of thin air, carried in by fate, or by those who sought to end her life. And the dogs, trained K9s from different precincts, behaved as if they already knew the gravity of the situation. One officer leaned close to his K9, whispering softly, "Titan, what are you smelling? What's so wrong?" Titan's ears twitched. He lowered his nose to the girl's neck and paused. The handler froze. "It's the toxin. She's been exposed to something synthetic, slow-acting, undetectable by normal screening. Left untreated, it will shut down her organs in hours." Dr. Carter felt her stomach drop. "A toxin in a hospital," she echoed, horror washing over her. Her mind raced through every possibility. Someone following the girl, someone trying to finish the job, someone with intimate knowledge of how to manipulate the system. This was no ordinary emergency. The ER was no longer a safe space. It was a potential crime scene, and the girl, though unconscious, was at the center of it all. Paramedics worked quickly, attaching monitors, drawing blood, prepping her for toxicology screening. One nurse, trembling, pointed at the IV line. "Look, the bag. It's not from our stock. Someone swapped it before she arrived. Dr. Carter's pulse spiked. Her eyes darted toward the encircling dogs. They reacted immediately, noses twitching, bodies stiffening. Even with the intruder long gone, they remained hyper-aware, guarding her as if they could sense the poison's invisible threads coursing through her veins. The tension in the ER thickened. Security officers scoured the floor, checking cameras and stairwells. Yet every glance returned the same haunting question: who did this? Whoever had tried to end the girl's life had vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a trail so meticulous that only instinct, canine instinct, could track it. Dr. Carter gently pressed her fingers against the girl's wrist, feeling the rapid pulse. The girl's eyes fluttered slightly beneath closed lids, but she remained unresponsive to voice or touch. One of the handlers leaned close, murmuring, "They can sense the poison. They know it's there before we even can. That's why they won't move. They're protecting her from what's coming." The ER lights flickered again, and the subtle hum of the ventilation system sounded suddenly sinister. The dogs shifted in unison, ears perking toward the hallway. Dr. Carter's stomach tightened. Not only had someone tried to kill her, someone might still be in the building. The very idea made her chest ache. She glanced at the monitors again. Her vitals were erratic, heart rate fluctuating wildly, oxygen levels dipping dangerously low. The poison's effects were subtle but insidious. Minutes were ticking away, each one carrying the weight of life and death. And yet, despite all the technology, the alerts, and the alarms, it was the dogs who were truly in control. Their senses were beyond any machine, sharper than any human assessment. One nurse, shaking, whispered, "Do we even know what this poison is?" A handler responded quietly, "Not exactly. Something synthetic, slow release. It bypasses most detection methods. Even our labs can't pick it up right away." Dr. Carter's mind reeled. She had treated countless overdoses, toxins, and rare chemical exposures, but never anything like this. The girl wasn't just a patient. She was a walking enigma, wrapped in danger with her own silent army standing guard. Then the first subtle clue of her identity emerged. Her lips parted slightly, forming almost unintelligible words. Dr. Carter leaned in closer. The girl's voice was faint, hoarse, but distinct. "He followed." The room fell silent. The 14 dogs stiffened instantly. Titan at her head growled softly. The others mirrored him, forming a protective shield tighter than before. Dr. Carter's heart thumped. He followed her. The words were small, yet they carried a weight that shattered the already tense air. Someone had tracked this girl, targeted her, and attempted to silence her. The lab tech returned, face pale. "We've detected something," he announced, voice tight. "It's a rare synthetic compound. If untreated, it will shut down multiple organ systems in a matter of hours. The antidote exists, but we need to act fast." Dr. Carter nodded sharply, adrenaline surging. "Prepare it immediately. Administer as soon as possible." The handlers and security officers glanced at each other, unease written across their faces. "If she's been targeted before arriving here, whoever did this may not stop," one said quietly. Dr. Carter swallowed hard. "Then we'll keep her protected until we figure it out. Full lockdown. No one in or out without clearance." The dogs seemed to sense the gravity of the order, their tension shifting into quiet vigilance. They had smelled the danger, detected the toxin, and somehow, even though each was trained by different handlers, they had acted as one. 14 lives and instincts converged to guard one fragile girl whose identity remained a mystery. Minutes passed like hours. The antidote was being prepared, every movement precise, careful, and urgent. The girl's chest rose and fell unevenly, her pulse erratic, but there was a small, almost imperceptible improvement after a saline flush. The handlers kept the dogs in position, refusing to break the circle for even a second. Then suddenly, one dog at the foot of the gurney stood abruptly and barked sharply toward the hallway. Another joined him, growling, and a third circled the room in a rapid, tense sweep. Dr. Carter's heart raced. They weren't reacting to anything the humans could see. They were sensing something beyond sight. "Someone's here," muttered a nurse, voice barely audible. Security radios crackled. "Stairwell clear," came the reply, tense and clipped. Yet the dogs did not settle. Every hair on their bodies bristled, ears pivoting toward corners, vents, and shadows that should have been empty. Dr. Carter pressed her hand against the girl's arm again. "Hold on," she whispered. "Just hold on, we're here." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. 14 dogs, a frightened hospital staff, a girl who was a living mystery, and an invisible threat lurking somewhere beyond human perception. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the hospital, the person who had followed her watched, waited, and calculated their next move. The ER lights flickered again, shadows stretching like fingers across the room. The girl's fingers twitched slightly, a signal small enough for only the most perceptive to notice. The dogs stiffened again. One growl, low and warning, cut through the silence, and in that instant everyone understood. The danger wasn't past. It was right there, waiting, watching. Dr. Carter's stomach knotted with dread. She realized for the first time that the girl's life depended not just on medicine, but on instincts, loyalty, and a chain of events that no human could fully control. And the question that hovered over the room, silent but unshakable, was the one that would haunt them all night. If the dogs hadn't been here, would the girl have survived long enough for anyone to help her at all? The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered again, casting long shadows across the walls. The hum of machines and monitors blended into a tense symphony of life, death, and uncertainty. Dr. Ellen Carter stood over the gurney, her fingers gripping the edges like a lifeline. The girl, still unconscious, lay at the center of a silent battlefield. 14 police dogs surrounded her, alert, tense, as if their very bodies were shields against a danger no human could perceive. Minutes ago, the first blood samples had been drawn, sent to the lab, and technicians worked frantically under the weight of an invisible clock counting down toward disaster. The girl's vitals were fragile, heart rate spiking erratically, oxygen dipping dangerously low, her pale skin clammy and cold to the touch. Every second mattered. Dr. Carter paced the room, glancing at the monitors, then at the dogs. Titan, the German shepherd at the head of the bed, kept a steady watch on the girl's IV line, nose twitching with every subtle movement. One of the handlers murmured, "They can smell the compound. They know it's in her system, and they won't leave her side until it's neutralized." At that exact moment, the lab technician returned, pale and wide-eyed, holding a tablet. "Doctor, you need to see this," he said, voice shaking. Dr. Carter grabbed the device, scanning the results. Her pulse quickened and the room seemed to tilt. The blood work confirmed what no one had expected. The girl's bloodstream contained a rare, slow-release synthetic toxin. It was not a typical poison or drug. It was chemical warfare grade, engineered to bypass standard hospital screening and evade detection until it was too late. Left untreated, it would shut down her organs within hours. Dr. Carter felt the weight of the words settle in her chest. This isn't accidental," she murmured. "Someone did this intentionally, and they knew exactly what they were doing." The dogs shifted in response, bodies tensing as if agreeing with her assessment. Titan stepped slightly closer, ears up, nostrils flaring. Every K9 in the room seemed to hum with a silent understanding. The girl's life was in immediate danger, and their instincts had already determined the severity. Security officers exchanged anxious glances. "So whoever did this could still be in the building," one muttered. Dr. Carter's stomach twisted, or watching, waiting. She turned to the paramedics. "We need the antidote now, full dose. Monitor her heart, vitals, and breathing continuously. Prepare for complications." Technicians and nurses sprang into action, moving with a coordinated urgency that could only be driven by the knowledge that one wrong step could mean the girl's death. Dr. Carter stayed close to the bed, hand on the girl's arm, whispering soothing words, though she knew the girl could not respond. The room was tense, electric, every movement heavy with consequence. Then a nurse noticed something strange, the IV bag hanging above the gurney. It had not been issued by the hospital. Its markings were unfamiliar, the fluid slightly darker than standard saline. Dr. Carter froze. Her eyes scanned the bag, then the tubing, then the girl's frail hand clutching the sheet. "Someone swapped this," she said quietly, "before she arrived." Titan growled low, a vibration that seemed to echo through the room. One of the handlers tightened his grip on the leash. This is serious," he said. "They didn't just want her dead, they wanted her invisible while it happened. These dogs, they smelled the compound before we even knew it existed." The words sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the ER. 14 dogs had independently reacted to a single, invisible threat, a chemical designed to be undetectable, and they had done it with unerring precision. Dr. Carter looked down at the girl. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, a fragile rhythm that seemed impossibly delicate. She was alive, but only just. The antidote was administered slowly, carefully, as technicians adjusted her drip and monitored every response. Even as the chemical entered her system, the dogs did not relax. Their vigilance was unwavering, their gaze piercing through the walls, floors, and corridors as if scanning for a presence no human could see. Minutes stretched, each one feeling like hours. The girl's vitals began to stabilize slightly, a flicker of hope in a room otherwise gripped by tension. But the subtle twitch of her fingers reminded everyone that the danger had not passed. Whoever had attempted this attack was still out there, and if they had succeeded once, what would stop them from trying again? Dr. Carter's mind raced. She had treated overdoses, toxins, and chemical exposures before, but never anything like this. This was methodical, planned, precise, and terrifyingly personal. The girl's unconscious whispers from earlier, "he followed," echoed in her mind. Someone was targeting this girl, someone who had infiltrated a hospital with surgical precision. Outside the circle of dogs, the staff remained tense. One nurse whispered, "Do we even know who she is?" Dr. Carter shook her head. "No, we don't even have a name yet. No ID, no family, no clue. She's a Jane Doe, but she isn't just any girl. Someone wanted her gone, and these dogs, they knew it before anyone else could react." The dogs shifted slightly, noses flaring again. Titan let out a low growl, scanning the doorway. Another Malinois pawed the ground, signaling caution. Every movement was deliberate, instinctive, protective. They were guarding not just a patient, but a secret the humans could not yet understand. Dr. Carter knew that if the antidote worked, she would have bought precious time, but the girl's life was far from safe. The poison was complex, engineered to bypass detection and linger in her system. And if the intruder returned this time, the danger would escalate beyond the hospital walls. The technician checked the monitors. "Her heart rate is stabilizing, but it's still unstable. We need to keep monitoring. Any spike and she could crash again." Dr. Carter nodded. "Understood. Keep the antidote running, full vigilance." The room fell into a tense rhythm, the humans moving quickly, efficiently, while the dogs maintained their protective circle. Every eye was fixed on the girl, every ear attuned to the faintest sound, every instinct on edge. And all the while, the threat that had brought her here, subtle, unseen, calculated, loomed in the background, a shadow over the fragile hope that life could be preserved tonight. Then came a faint sound from the hallway, a creak, a soft shuffle, too small for most humans to notice. Every dog snapped their heads toward the noise simultaneously. Titan growled, low and menacing. Another barked sharply, while a third began packing slightly, eyes fixed on the corridor. Dr. Carter's stomach sank. "It's not over." A security officer peeked down the hall. "No one's there," he whispered, tension vibrating in his voice. The dogs remained unconvinced. Their senses were faster than any camera, any human intuition. They could detect the unseen chemical traces, the faintest scent of a human intruder, the subtle signs of danger that no technology could replicate. And right now, their instincts screamed. The threat had not passed. Dr. Carter pressed a hand to the girl's forehead. Her pulse was stabilizing slowly, but the room still felt like a battlefield. 14 dogs, a girl with no identity, and a poison that could kill silently within hours. All the hospital protocols, alarms, and technology in the world couldn't compete with the raw, instinctive intelligence that now held the line. And as she stood there watching the monitors, the dogs, and the girl whose life hung in the balance, Dr. Carter realized something chilling. Someone had already tried to kill this girl once. They might try again. And if they did, only instinct, animal instinct, might save her next time. The night was far from over, and for the first time Dr. Carter understood. The hospital, normally a sanctuary, had become a stage for a battle beyond human comprehension. The girl was alive, for now, but every second that passed increased the stakes. The dogs tightened their circle instinctively, a living wall of protection. And in the quiet tension of the ER with monitors beeping steadily, Dr. Carter whispered softly, almost to herself, "You're not alone. Not tonight. Not ever." The girl stirred slightly, a weak, almost imperceptible breath, the first spark of life since her arrival. The dogs responded instantly, shifting closer protectively, as if acknowledging that the battle was far from over, but that, for now, she had a chance. The ER, once a place of routine and calm, had transformed into something unrecognizable. Shadows clung to every corner, stretching unnaturally under the hospital lights. The beeping monitors, the distant hum of ventilators, even the faint rattling of supply carts, all seemed amplified in the tense atmosphere. At the center, the girl lay on her gurney, fragile, unconscious, her life teetering on a razor's edge. Around her, the 14 police dogs remained unmoving, their bodies a living barricade, instincts alert, every muscle taut with focus. Dr. Ellen Carter glanced at the monitors, noting the slow, uneven rise of the girl's vitals. The antidote was stabilizing her, but only just. Her heart raced. Minutes matter. Seconds matter. Every passing heartbeat increased the stakes. She knew the dogs could sense the toxin, could sense danger, but what they could not sense were the intentions of the human who had put her in this state. And that uncertainty was the most terrifying part. One of the handlers leaned close to his K9, whispering, "They're reacting again. There's a presence nearby." Dr. Carter's head snapped up. A presence? Where? The security cameras show nothing. The handler's eyes were grim. They sense it differently. It's not about cameras or monitors, it's about instinct. And they're telling us someone is still here, someone who shouldn't be. The hairs on the back of Dr. Carter's neck prickled. She glanced down the hallway, half expecting to see a shadow move. Nothing. Yet the dogs remained tense, ears cocked, tails stiff. Titan at the head of the bed growled softly, a sound that vibrated in the tile floor, low but commanding attention. Another dog barked sharply toward the stairwell. Each movement was deliberate, precise, and coordinated. 14 separate animals, trained by different handlers, were acting in perfect unison. The paramedics worked quietly, drawing another blood sample for further toxicology testing. Every hand trembled slightly under the weight of urgency. One nurse whispered, "Do we even know who could have done this? Who would target a girl like this?" Dr. Carter shook her head. "I don't know, but whoever it is, they're organized, calculated. And now they're here. They might still try to finish what they started." Her words barely hung in the air when the faintest creak came from the hallway outside the ER doors. Every human froze. Every dog stiffened. The sound was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the reaction was immediate and synchronized. Titan growled, another Malinois barked sharply, and the German shepherd at the foot of the gurney began packing in a protective circle. Instinct had identified a threat where technology and human senses could detect nothing. A security officer whispered into his radio, voice tight, "All clear. No one in the hall." The dogs didn't relax. They sniffed the air, shifted their stance, and collectively glared toward the stairwell. Dr. Carter's stomach twisted. Whoever had followed the girl wasn't just targeting her with poison. They were watching, waiting, perhaps ready to strike again. Minutes passed in a tense, uneasy silence. The antidote continued to flow through her veins, stabilizing her vitals, but every movement in the ER felt magnified, every sound amplified. The dogs remained vigilant, a silent army guarding a fragile life from an unseen predator. Then, without warning, one of the nurses noticed something strange. The girl's IV line had shifted slightly, though no one had touched it. The fluid bag swung gently, casting an eerie shadow on the wall. One of the handlers' eyes narrowed. "She's being manipulated," he said softly. "Someone may have tampered with it remotely before arrival. The dogs sense it." Dr. Carter felt her pulse quicken. Remote manipulation, poison, a hospital. Her thoughts spun wildly. The ER was supposed to be a sanctuary, a controlled environment where life was protected. Now it was a stage for something far more dangerous, far more insidious. Suddenly, one of the dogs barked sharply at the supply closet. Another growled low at the stairwell. The tension in the room intensified. Dr. Carter froze. They're reacting to specific locations," she said, her voice trembling. "But there's no one there." The handlers exchanged glances. "It's not about the visible," one murmured. "It's about scent, movement, and behavior. They can sense chemical traces, residual presence. The toxins, the intruder, they know everything we can't see." Dr. Carter's eyes darted toward the girl. She lay still, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding around her. But her fingers twitched slightly, a subtle sign of life, as if she were aware in some deep, unconscious way. Titan leaned closer, nose hovering over her arm, eyes narrowed. Another dog shifted to block the IV line, as though anticipating another threat before it materialized. The lab technician returned, pale and breathless. "We've confirmed it," he said, voice tight. "There's a rare synthetic compound in her system. It's slow-release, highly potent, and engineered to bypass normal screening. Whoever did this knew exactly how to kill her without leaving evidence, until the dogs intervened." Dr. Carter's chest tightened. "So, the antidote is the only thing keeping her alive right now?" "Yes," the technician confirmed. "And if this person returns, they might try again. They may be testing the antidote's effectiveness, or worse, they may have backup plans." The room fell silent, the weight of realization pressing down on everyone. The dogs, sensing the unspoken fear, stiffened even further. Titan growled low, his gaze locked on the far corridor. Another Malinois barked, signaling vigilance. 14 dogs, working as one, protected the girl with a silent, instinctive awareness of a danger humans could barely comprehend. Dr. Carter swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the gurney. She knew that the girl's life depended on more than just medical skill. It depended on instincts, loyalty, and a chain of events that no human fully understood. The ER was no longer just a hospital, it was a battlefield, and every passing second was a fight for survival. Then, without warning, the girl stirred. A faint moan escaped her lips, almost imperceptible but enough to draw a collective sigh from the staff. The dogs immediately responded, adjusting their positions, eyes scanning, ears alert. Her small movements were enough to validate their vigilance, yet the danger had not passed. Dr. Carter leaned closer, whispering to her, "Hold on, stay with us." She glanced at the handlers. "We need to secure the entire floor. No one in, no one out, every exit monitored." The officers nodded, tense, radios crackling with instructions. The staff followed Dr. Carter's lead, moving efficiently while the dogs maintained their protective circle. Every eye was on the girl, every ear attuned to the faintest sound, every instinct ready to respond. Outside, the hospital corridors were quiet, but the tension in the ER suggested otherwise. A silent predator might still be near. The poison, the intruder, and the girl's fragile condition combined into a volatile equation. And in the midst of it, 14 police dogs acted as the only line of defense. The girl's fingers twitched again, a signal so subtle that most humans would have missed it. But the dogs responded instantly, tightening their circle, growling softly, warning the room that danger remained imminent. Dr. Carter felt the weight of the moment like a physical force pressing against her chest. Time had become a predator itself. Every second that passed increased the risk. The lab technician's voice cut through the tension. "Doctor, I've never seen anything like this. If it weren't for the dogs, she'd be dead by now. We'd have no warning, no chance to act." Dr. Carter nodded silently, eyes never leaving the girl. 14 dogs, a fragile human life, and a threat that no one could fully quantify, all collided in a single, terrifying moment. And somewhere in the shadows of the hospital, the intruder was still out there, waiting, watching, calculating. Every instinct, every precaution, every heroic intervention in the ER had bought time, but time alone would not save her if the predator returned. Dr. Carter pressed her hand against the girl's arm, whispering, "You're going to make it, just stay with us." The girl's pulse stabilized slightly, a fragile spark of life amid the storm. The dogs shifted closer, noses low, eyes piercing, a living shield against an invisible enemy. And for the first time since she arrived, the staff understood something terrifying and profound. Survival tonight depended not just on medicine, but on instinct, loyalty, and an unbreakable bond between human and animal. The shadow of the intruder lingered, unseen but undeniable, leaving everyone in the ER with the same question. If the dogs weren't here, would anyone even know she had been targeted, or would she have already been lost? The hospital floor had grown quieter, but the tension remained palpable, like a taut wire ready to snap. The rhythmic beeping of monitors echoed through the ER, punctuating the fragile calm. 14 police dogs still circled the girl, their bodies rigid, eyes sharp, and ears twitching at the slightest sound. The handlers and hospital staff moved carefully around them, acutely aware that the dogs were the only line of defense between the unconscious girl and an invisible threat that could return at any moment. Dr. Ellen Carter crouched beside the gurney, hand resting lightly on the girl's pale arm. Her fingers trembled slightly as she monitored her vitals. The antidote was working, slowly, imperceptibly, but every spike in heart rate reminded her of how close they had come to losing her. Then, just as hope seemed tentative, the girl's eyelids fluttered. A faint breath escaped her lips. "Stay with us," Dr. Carter whispered, her voice soft but urgent. The girl's eyes opened slightly, dim but aware, scanning the room in a haze of confusion. The ER lights reflected off the pale, frightened face of a girl who had been through horrors no one could yet imagine. Titan, the German shepherd at her head, leaned in protectively, nose close to her forehead, tail flicking once in cautious reassurance. The other dogs adjusted their positions instinctively, forming a tighter perimeter, their low growls soft but persistent. Even in the midst of awakening, the girl remained the center of their collective focus. Her first words were barely audible, a fragile whisper that sent a chill through everyone in the room. "He followed me." The handlers and Dr. Carter exchanged tense glances. Every hair on their arms prickled. The dogs stiffened immediately, growling in unison. The statement, though incomplete, confirmed the worst suspicions. The girl had been tracked, targeted, and someone still dangerous, was responsible for the attempt on her life. "Who followed you?" Dr. Carter asked gently, leaning closer. "Can you tell me?" The girl's lips quivered. Her voice was hoarse, almost a ghost of sound, but the words were clear enough to chill everyone. "The man, the crash," she paused, eyes darting toward the hallway as if sensing the unseen predator herself. "He tried to finish me." A ripple of tension spread across the room. The security officers tightened their grips on their radios. Nurses exchanged fearful glances. The handlers' faces were pale, eyes narrowing in grim understanding. The dogs growled again, low and menacing, signaling that the danger was not hypothetical, it was imminent. Dr. Carter swallowed hard. "You're safe for now," she said gently, gripping the girl's hand. "You're not alone. We're going to protect you." The girl's eyes darted around the room, barely registering the humans but clearly aware of the dogs. She instinctively reached out a trembling hand toward Titan. The German shepherd lowered his head, allowing her fingers to brush his fur. She exhaled softly, a brief relief passing through her small body. The handlers and nurses exchanged astonished glances. Despite the trauma, she instinctively recognized the animals as protectors. The lab technician returned, urgency etched across his face. "Doctor, the antidote is stabilizing her vitals, but she's not out of danger. The synthetic compound is sophisticated, slow release, highly potent. Even small delays in treatment could be catastrophic." Dr. Carter nodded grimly. "We're monitoring every heartbeat. Keep everything ready for immediate intervention." The girl's voice returned, slightly stronger this time. They wanted me gone," she said, pausing between each word. "The crash wasn't an accident, it wasn't random." The room went cold. Even with the antidote in her system, the gravity of her words rippled through everyone present. The girl was not a random victim of circumstance. She had been deliberately targeted. Her survival, miraculous as it was only temporary if whoever had orchestrated the attack decided to act again. A nurse whispered almost to herself, "She knows, she survived for a reason." Dr. Carter tightened her grip on the girl's hand. "Can you tell us more? Do you know who did this?" The girl's eyes flicked toward the stairwell, then back at the dogs, before her voice returned in a trembling whisper. "Bikers, the club, they hurt my mom. I saw everything." A gasp ran through the room. The pieces of a dangerous puzzle were starting to emerge. The girl had witnessed a crime, and someone had tried to silence her before she could testify or escape. The hospital had become a battlefield, the antidote only a temporary shield, and the 14 police dogs the only force standing between her and annihilation. One of the handlers murmured, "That's why the dogs reacted the way they did. They can detect fear, stress, and chemical traces of danger. They knew she had been poisoned deliberately. They knew she needed protection beyond what humans could provide." Dr. Carter glanced around the room. Every staff member, every officer, every handler understood the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary ER case. This was a life-and-death situation, a real-life crime scene unfolding in real time. And the girl, fragile and terrified, was the centerpiece. The girl's voice grew slightly stronger. "He tried to make sure I never tell." Her words were halting, broken by fear and trauma, but the meaning was unmistakable. Someone had planned to silence her, and if she had not been brought to the hospital under the protection of trained officers and instinctive canines, she would have been lost. Dr. Carter felt a lump form in her throat. "You're safe now," she said firmly, though every instinct told her to remain vigilant. "We're not going to let anything happen to you." Titan nudged her hand gently with his nose, a silent affirmation. The other dogs adjusted positions, circling tighter, signaling to everyone present that the threat was real and ongoing. The human staff may have understood the danger intellectually, but the dogs knew it viscerally. Then suddenly the ER lights flickered and a faint shadow moved past the hallway outside. Every dog stiffened instantly, ears pricking, bodies taut. Dr. Carter's heart leapt. The threat had returned, or at least the dogs sensed the intruder's lingering presence. Security cameras showed nothing, but instinct never lied. The girl shivered, her eyes widening in recognition. He's still here," she whispered. The words barely reached Dr. Carter's ears, but the meaning was clear. The attacker, whoever had orchestrated the poison and attempted to end her life, had not given up. They were still out there, watching, waiting for another opportunity. One of the handlers spoke quietly but firmly. "We need to move her to a fully secured room immediately. Lockdown procedures, full perimeter security. These dogs will continue to protect her, but we can't rely on instincts alone now." Dr. Carter nodded, tension radiating from every nerve. Prepare a secure room. No one goes in or out without my authorization. We keep the antidote running. We keep her alive. And we don't leave until she's safe. The girl's gaze shifted to the dogs, eyes wide, recognition and gratitude mixing with lingering fear. They saved me, she whispered, voice barely audible. I don't know how. Titan rested his head lightly against her arm, a silent guardian, as if to answer her unspoken question. The other dogs remained vigilant, alert, protective. 14 lives, trained instincts, and unwavering loyalty had converged to safeguard this girl from a threat humans could not yet fully understand. Dr. Carter realized, with a deep, shivering certainty, that without these animals, the girl would have already been lost. Not just to the poison, but to whoever had orchestrated the attempt on her life. Her survival depended not just on medicine, but on instinct, protection, and the bond between human and animal that defied explanation. And somewhere in the shadows of the hospital, the intruder remained unseen, patient, calculating, and ready to strike again. For the first time, Dr. Carter understood the full scope of the danger. The girl's awakening was not the end. It was a new beginning, a tense, terrifying countdown in which every second could determine whether she lived or died. The dogs tightened their circle instinctively. Titan let out a low, protective growl, and the girl, slowly recognizing the scope of her protectors, whispered one final word to the room. "Don't let them." The sentence hung unfinished in the charged air. Every human in the ER froze, every ear strained, every instinct screamed that the threat had not passed. And in that moment, the stakes became crystal clear. Survival tonight would not just be about medicine. It would be about vigilance, courage, and the instincts of 14 police dogs standing as silent sentinels against a predator that had already proven it would stop at nothing. The ER had become a war zone in miniature, though the battle was silent, invisible to the untrained eye. The monitors beeped steadily, a fragile heartbeat that seemed almost defiant amid the tension. 14 police dogs remained encircling the girl, every muscle taut, every nostril flaring. Their eyes, sharp and unyielding, followed the faintest shadow, the smallest movement. No one dared move too quickly, for fear of breaking the invisible line the dogs had drawn between the girl and danger. Dr. Ellen Carter crouched by the gurney, her heart hammering. The girl lay pale but conscious, weakly gripping the blanket. Her eyes darted toward Titan, the German shepherd who had been her silent guardian since she'd arrived. Her lips trembled as she whispered, He's here." One of the handlers, voice low and steady, murmured, "The dogs are picking up movement, scent trails, residual chemical traces. They can tell the difference between ordinary foot traffic and someone who's been here before." Suddenly, Titan leapt forward, nose pressed against the linoleum near the hallway entrance, growling low and menacing. Another Malinois barked sharply, while a Belgian Malinois backed toward the stairwell, tail stiff, ears upright. The dogs were no longer just guarding. They were signaling, pointing toward a specific location, a focal point of unseen threat. Dr. Carter's pulse quickened. "What are they sensing?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The handler shook his head. "Something only they can detect, something or someone. We can follow their lead, but we can't see it ourselves." The girl's voice broke the silence, fragile and quivering. "The crash, the club, they're coming for me." Dr. Carter felt her stomach tighten. Pieces of the puzzle began to form. The girl had witnessed something. Someone had tried to silence her with poison, and now the predators, human predators, were moving unseen in the hospital. Every instinct told her that the threat was close, maybe just outside the room. Then Titan barked again, more urgently, almost commanding. The other dogs mirrored him, forming a tighter circle, noses pointing toward the ER exit doors. Dr. Carter realized in a chilling moment that the dogs were not just defending, they were tracking. The handlers moved cautiously, allowing the dogs to guide them, Every step was measured, every movement calculated. They followed Titan toward the supply corridor, the tension thick enough to choke anyone who breathed too loudly. The girl's fragile whispers floated behind them. "Don't let him." The dog stopped abruptly at the doorway of the supply closet. Titan growled low, hackles raised. One of the officers leaned in and flicked the lights on inside the closet. The room appeared empty, at least to human eyes, but the dogs were insistent, barking and circling. Titan pressed his nose to a cabinet handle, then backpedaled slightly, growling. The other dogs barked in unison. One handler's eyes widened. "He's been here," he whispered. "Residue, scent trails, the dogs know exactly where he touched, where he left traces." Dr. Carter swallowed hard, realizing the implication. Then he might still be nearby, watching, waiting. Suddenly, one of the dogs, Jet, a sleek black German shepherd, darted past the doorway and toward the stairwell, barking loudly. Another followed, growling as they disappeared from view. Titan's growl deepened, a warning that resonated through the ER. The girl gasped softly. "No, don't let him take me." Dr. Carter's mind raced. "They're going to find him," she said, voice tight. "They're going to make him reveal himself." The officers and handlers moved quickly, radios crackling as they coordinated. The hospital floor, normally calm at this hour, had become a theater of tension and instinct. Every sound, every flicker of movement, every shadow held meaning, and the dogs were the only interpreters. Minutes passed, each one stretching impossibly long. Then came a sudden commotion, a shrill cry, a heavy footfall, and the distinct sound of a man's voice shouting. "Stop them!" The dogs had located the intruder. Titan and the others formed a protective line near the girl, growling, barking, circling, signaling that the danger had arrived in person. Dr. Carter's chest tightened as security officers moved toward the stairwell. The intruder emerged, a tall, broad man, leather jacket, rough hands, eyes wild with panic and anger. He froze when he saw the dogs, their teeth bared, bodies coiled like springs. Every instinct in his body screamed that he had underestimated them. The girl gasped, recognition flooding her fragile voice. "The club, they." Titan lunged forward, barking, as if to warn the intruder that he could go no further. The other dogs mirrored him, forming a semicircle, protective and aggressive. The intruder stumbled backward, eyes wide, realizing that he was facing an intelligence beyond human comprehension. 14 police dogs working in perfect unison, guided by instinct, protecting a single, fragile human life. One of the handlers called out, voice firm, commanding, "Police, drop your weapon if you have one. Step away from the gurney. You're surrounded." The man froze, scanning the room, calculating his options. But the dogs did not waver. Titan growled, low and threatening, eyes locked on the intruder. Jet barked sharply at his feet. The intruder's resolve began to crumble. The girl, weak but conscious, whispered something that made Dr. Carter's heart stop. He tried to hurt my mom, I saw." Dr. Carter realized then that the intruder's motives were deeper than just silencing the girl. He had been part of a larger plan, an organized threat that extended beyond this hospital, and the girl had seen something critical, something that had made her a target. The intruder's panic became visible. You can't, the club, he stammered. His words trailed off as the dogs pressed their advantage, growls escalating, circling closer, forcing him toward the stairwell exit. One officer lunged forward, handcuffs ready. The intruder tried to flee, but the dogs were relentless. Titan blocked the doorway. Another Malinois cut off his path. Jet darted to his side. The man stumbled, cornered by instinct, training, and sheer force of will that the animals projected. Dr. Carter approached cautiously, watching the girl's face. Her eyes were wide, frightened but relieved. The dogs had done what humans alone could not. They had neutralized the immediate threat. The intruder, once confident and dangerous, was now trapped, facing 14 alert, protective dogs and the officers ready to intervene. The man finally fell to his knees, hands raised. I didn't mean to, it wasn't supposed to. Dr. Carter shook her head, voice firm. You tried to kill her, poisoned her, threatened her life, and for what? The girl whispered, barely audible but clear. He wanted to stop me from telling. The room fell silent except for the dogs, low growls and the girl's fragile breathing. 14 police dogs had acted as one, defending a single child from a human predator, sensing danger no human could detect, and forcing the intruder into submission without a single human casualty. Dr. Carter knelt beside the girl, voice soft but steady. You're safe now. They've stopped him. He can't hurt you anymore. The girl's eyes welled with tears. They saved me, she whispered, glancing at each dog in turn. All of them. Titan rested his head gently against her arm. The other dogs circled protectively, their posture relaxed but alert. The battle was over, at least for the night. The intruder had been stopped, but the ripple effects of the threat, the poison, the targeting, the larger club were still very real. Dr. Carter realized something profound. These 14 dogs had not only saved a life, they had revealed the truth, uncovered the threat, and acted with an intelligence and instinct beyond human comprehension. Without them, the girl would have had no chance. And as the hospital floor slowly returned to a semblance of calm, one question lingered in Dr. Carter's mind, heavy and insistent. If the dogs had not been there, if instinct had not intervened, how many lives would have been lost before anyone even realized what was happening? The girl looked up at Titan, whispering again, voice trembling but grateful. Thank you for saving me. The German shepherd gave a soft, reassuring nuzzle. The other dogs stood around her, protective and unwavering, as if silently acknowledging her words. For now, the immediate danger was over, but the events of the night had left an indelible mark on everyone who had witnessed it. The intruder, handcuffed and surrounded, glared at the circle of dogs, understanding fully, perhaps for the first time, that his plans had been thwarted by instincts, loyalty, and courage beyond human comprehension. And in that quiet, tense moment, Dr. Carter realized the extraordinary truth. Some guardians don't wear badges or carry guns. Some guard with instincts sharper than any human's, loyalty fiercer than any human could muster, and courage that defies understanding. The ER had finally settled into an uneasy calm. The intruder was restrained, handcuffed, and under heavy guard, while 14 police dogs stood vigil around the girl, their bodies still taut with the remnants of battle, eyes alert, ears twitching at the slightest sound. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, sweat, and adrenaline. For everyone present, the night had been a test of instincts, courage, and the thin line between life and death. Dr. Ellen Carter stayed close to the girl, holding her hand gently. You're safe now, she whispered. Nothing's going to happen to you. The girl blinked slowly, fragile but alive, her small hand gripping the doctor with surprising strength. Her eyes, wide and haunted, scanned the circle of dogs around her. Each one stood like a sentinel, a guardian who had risked everything to keep her alive. The girl's voice trembled, barely audible. They saved me, all of them. Titan, the German shepherd at her head, lowered his massive head, gently resting it near her arm. Another Malinois nudged her gently, as if to reassure her that their protection was ongoing, even now, in the aftermath of the confrontation. Dr. Carter's eyes filled with tears. In all her years in medicine, she had treated countless emergencies, but never had she witnessed such a precise, instinctive, and selfless act of protection. Outside the ER, security officers had secured the floor. Every camera was being monitored, every exit checked, but the intruder had no chance of escaping. The man who had tried to poison the girl, whose motives had remained obscure until now, had been confronted not by technology alone, but by raw instinct and loyalty, the kind that could not be replicated by any human or machine. The girl's breathing steadied, shallow but even. Her small fingers twitched as she reached out toward Titan again. The German shepherd nudged her hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed over the last tense hours. Dr. Carter knelt beside her, voice soft. "Do you know why they're here?" The girl shook her head, eyes wide, as though trying to grasp the enormity of what had happened. They saved your life," Dr. Carter explained. "They knew the danger before anyone else did. They protected you when no one else could, and because of them, you're alive." The girl's lips trembled. I don't understand how they knew." One of the handlers stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "They're trained, yes, but it's more than that. They can sense fear, stress, chemical traces, threats that humans can't detect. They've guarded you all night and they've been perfect. You're lucky, no, miraculously lucky, that they were here." The girl's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was going to die." Her small shoulders shook, and Dr. Carter felt a deep, almost crushing empathy. The terror she must have felt, knowing that someone had tried to end her life and that she was powerless to stop it, it was unimaginable. Titan rested his massive head on her arm again, a living, breathing source of comfort. One by one, the other dogs shifted closer, their bodies forming a protective semicircle that radiated warmth and reassurance. In that instant, the ER no longer felt like a place of fear. It felt like a fortress, and the girl was the heart it guarded. The intruder, handcuffed and surrounded, glared at the dogs with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The man's plan had been meticulous: poison, manipulation, intimidation. But all of it had crumbled under instincts sharper than any of his calculations. The dogs had revealed the truth. He had been tracked, caught, and cornered before he could strike again. One of the officers approached Dr. Carter quietly. "You realize what just happened here, don't you?" he said. "Without those dogs, she wouldn't have lasted an hour, maybe less, and we wouldn't have seen the intruder until it was too late." Dr. Carter nodded, swallowing hard. "I know," she admitted. "And now we have to make sure she's cared for, protected, and that justice is served." The girl, weak but alert, looked around the room. Her eyes lingered on Titan, then on the other dogs, as though seeing them for the first time, not just as animals but as heroes. I want to thank them," she whispered. "All of them." The handlers smiled faintly. "They don't need thanks," one murmured. "They just do what they're trained to do, what they must do, but I think they understand your gratitude anyway." Slowly, Dr. Carter helped the girl sit up slightly. Her movements were tentative, each one careful, cautious. The dogs remained close, forming a living barrier between her and any lingering threat. Titan leaned against the bed, heavy and reassuring, while the others circled, eyes never leaving the intruder. For the first time that night, Dr. Carter allowed herself a deep exhale. The immediate danger had passed. The girl was alive. The poison was countered. The intruder was contained. And yet, the room still vibrated with the residual tension of hours of terror and instinctive heroism. The girl whispered again, barely audible, I don't know what I would have done without them." Dr. Carter squeezed her hand. "You don't have to imagine it. You're here, you're alive, and they've kept you safe." Outside the ER, more officers had arrived, ready to escort the girl to a secure location while the investigation continued. News of the intruder's capture and the miraculous survival of the girl would spread quickly. But Dr. Carter knew that the story most important to remember was not about the man or the poison. It was about the 14 police dogs whose instincts had prevented a tragedy. The girl's eyes lingered on Titan. I think they're heroes," she said softly, "all of them." One of the handlers nodded. "You're right, and now it's your turn to be brave just like they were. You survived when no one expected you to. That's courage too." The girl smiled faintly, a fragile but real expression. Tears streaked her cheeks, but there was a light in her eyes, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and awe. She had faced the unthinkable and survived, and she knew that the 14 dogs around her had been the difference between life and death. Dr. Carter watched as the girl leaned against Titan, resting her head lightly on his fur. The other dogs stood close, protective but calm, Their bodies relaxed now that the immediate threat was neutralized. For the first time in hours, the ER felt safe. The intruder, surrounded and restrained, glared at the circle of dogs. He had underestimated instincts, loyalty, and courage beyond comprehension. He had learned too late that no plan could overcome the combination of skill, instinct, and determination that had saved this girl's life. Dr. Carter realized then that some heroes don't wear uniforms or carry badges. Some heroes don't wield guns or drive ambulances. Some heroes rely on instincts, training, and an unwavering dedication to protect the vulnerable, even when the odds seem impossible. And tonight, in that dimly lit ER, 14 police dogs had proven that courage comes in many forms. The girl whispered one final time, her small voice filled with wonder and gratitude. "Thank you for saving me." Titan rested his head gently against her arm. The other dogs shifted slightly, forming a protective embrace around her. Dr. Carter allowed herself a tear, the culmination of relief, awe, and the sheer emotional weight of the night. She had witnessed something extraordinary, something no human alone could achieve. The girl was safe. The intruder was captured, the poison neutralized. But most importantly, the 14 police dogs had reminded everyone present of a truth often forgotten in a world of chaos. Loyalty, instinct, and courage can manifest in the most unexpected forms. For the girl, the night would always be remembered as the night she was surrounded, protected, and saved by heroes with fur, paws, and unwavering hearts. And for everyone watching, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, salvation comes not from human hands, but from four-legged guardians who see danger before it arrives, act before it strikes, and stand unflinchingly in the line between life and death.